Hey guys, Dr. Emily here for the Joy of Coding Academy, and I am super excited to talk to you today about how not to become a six-figure software developer. All right, so we are going to work on that today, and I just want to make sure I can see your comments. If you're here joining us live, super excited to have you. Post your questions, post your comments. I can't wait to see it. So if you're in this Joy of Coding Facebook group, you're probably wondering, how do I become a six-figure software developer? Well, today we're going to talk about 5 key things not to do to help you become a six-figure software developer in 2023. So the first one is don't dive straight into a framework, right? So if you're thinking about becoming a six-figure software developer, you've probably heard of frameworks. And if you haven't, let me just share this with you for a quick second. A lot of jobs are in front end, back end, mobile development. And all of those software development jobs use frameworks, not just languages. A language is like, how things are created, what the 7 basics look like, right? All of those things. And if you're curious about the 7 basics, we got a free course in the group, so I can totally tag you. Just reach out. But a language is how you say things, how you do things in the 7 basics, how you go about solving problems. And a framework is a particular way of solving a general category of problems for a particular language. So for example, React.js, Node, Angular, these are frameworks for JavaScript. So you can have additional support that helps make tasks easier to do. It lowers the bar to entry for certain tasks. Okay, so the frameworks are really important, and all of these software development jobs, front end, back end, mobile, they're going to rely on frameworks to do the heavy lifting, to get the code that you want running in the space, in the technological ecosystem, front end, web, back end, server, or mobile. And so what I often will see people do is they'll dive straight into the framework, right? And actually, if your goal is to become a six-figure software developer, you absolutely need to know a framework. About one, maybe two. You don't need all of them, but you absolutely don't want to dive in there first, right? First, we want to master the fundamentals, right? We want those 7 basics locked in and loaded. Yes, exactly. Ooh, great question, Eric. The difference between a framework and a library. I love this. So just to clarify on that, a framework is going to be a collection, and it's basically a way of solving a particular category of problems easier. Libraries do the same thing, but they tend to be more one-off. And so Eric, feel free to weigh in if you think differently on that. But what I usually see is that frameworks are kind of like a bigger library, right? There's languages, frameworks, and libraries. That's typically what I see. And so, a library is going to allow you to reuse the code that others have written, whereas a framework is going to be a collection of functions and libraries and setup, right? Configuration setup that's going to allow you to solve bigger problems faster and a particular type of flavor of problem, right? So like front end frameworks allow you to create web applications, right? That run on the web and run in front end. Whereas like a library, you might have a math library, something like that. So great thought, Eric. Love that. Keep the comments coming. Love it. So what I often see beginning coders do is they say, okay, how do I get a job? And they read on some web page, okay, I need to know React. And so they dive in and start learning React. No, stop. That's not how to become a six-figure software developer. Do you want to know React? Sure, that'll be super helpful when it's at the appropriate moment in time for you to learn it, right? First, we want to master the fundamental basics. And they don't even need to be in JavaScript. We can use any other language for that. Any language is easy to learn. That's where we want to master those fundamentals of problem solving, those 7 basics. So my advice is do not drive straight into a framework because by their very nature, think about it. The only reason we need a framework and we can't just use the language itself is because the problem is super complicated to solve. When you're a beginning coder, do you really want to tackle some of the most complicated problems out there that we've created frameworks for? Probably not. Let's simplify it. Let's focus on mastering those fundamentals first, then look at the framework. All right? So that would be my advice. And so that's number one, don't dive straight into a framework before you've mastered the basics. And number two, don't skip building your problem solving muscles, right? This is super important. So we've mastered the 7 basics, loops, functions, variables, all that. We know their role in problem solving. All right, let's take it up a notch. Let's go up a level. Let's go up a little bit. We want to keep our mental problem solving muscles sharp and strong. Why is this important? Well, first of all, if your goal is getting a job, currently the technical interview, which is basically like a final exam in data structures and algorithms, most commonly, right? The technical interview is currently one of the major screening mechanisms that employers use to figure out if you know your stuff. So they're going to give you these really challenging brain teaser type problems to see how good a problem solver you are. And that may or may not align with the work that you're actually asked to do on the other side. That's a separate conversation. We can totally get into that. But the importance of your problem solving muscle, aside from the practicalities of just qualifying for a development job, is also because you want to have that in your back pocket. I'll be honest, in the average day-to-day life of a software developer, you don't often need to really stretch your problem solving muscle. Usually you're debugging, you're testing, you're adding new functionality, you're taking the existing design and you're kicking it up a notch. When do we need the problem solving? Every once in a while you get a problem that's like, gosh, man, this is a little difficult. I'm not totally like on board with that. That's why we want our problem solving muscle. That's why we want our problem solving muscle, primed and ready to go. So that when we get that moment, when we have that challenge that, isn't the way we've thought about things in the past, that we're ready to go and find a new solution. Awesome. Cool. Oh, I love that clarification, Eric, for frameworks and libraries. Super good. So we don't want to skip building our mental problem solving muscles, but we just want to be clear on the purpose. The purpose is so that we can solve more challenging problems that our software organization has never solved before. That's the real purpose. This is why it's part of the technical interview. It's not because you actually need it in your day-to-day job as a software developer. It's because if your software organization hits a challenge it doesn't know how to solve, all we have left are our problem-solving muscles, right? So we want to make sure that we keep those sharp and fine and ready. But it's not about, oh my goodness, I have to pass this exam. Oh my goodness, I have to pass the technical interview. No, it's about, I need to maintain my mental capability of solving problems so that when I hit one on the job that I don't know how to solve, I have a problem solving process to fall back on to be able to do this effectively, right? So what I recommend is that we continue practicing our problem solving techniques. I love using sites like HackerRank or LeetCode, which we use inside the Joy Coding Academy to help us. There's a ton of free sites out there where you can go and practice these problems. So that's not a problem at all. But just be clear on what the purpose is, like why you're doing that. Because it's not just to get the job, right? It's really to keep your saw sharp. It's kind of your daily mental maintenance on making sure that, you really stay nimble and able to solve problems. You don't get stuck in a rut where you face a challenge and you don't know what to do. You don't know how to solve it, right? We want to avoid that. Right? So we just keep our mental muscles sharp. It's like exercising. If you stopped exercising, you'd get out of shape. Same thing with our mind muscle. Only as programmers, we're paid to use our mind muscles, right? Awesome. So, okay, number 3, how not to become a 6-figure software developer. Only writing code from scratch on a blank page. If you only write code from scratch on a blank page, you are not going to be set up for success as a 6-figure software developer. You might be, but it's not a guarantee. Because if you think about it, why are there 6-figure software developer jobs? It's because there's a company who has built a business around a piece of software. Therefore, the reason they can afford to hire a 6-figure software developer is because the software exists and generates revenue for them and they need to maintain it. How often do you think a 6-figure software developer is writing code from scratch? Way little, right? Way little. Most often, they have to augment code that's already there and read and understand and then adapt and edit code that's already in their code base. So if you want to be a really strong 6-figure software developer and have success when you get on the job, you want to know how to read code that other people wrote, understand it enough to make correct changes, maybe even use it as a template, and then edit it and change it and transform it to do something new, to fix bugs in it, right? The skills, the bread and butter day-to-day skills of a 6-figure software developer are reading other people's code and correctly editing it and testing it to verify that those edits were correct. Debugging. These are the daily skills that you need. So writing from scratch, while it might be helpful in an academic sense, and it can be helpful when you're learning to master those fundamentals, mastering the basics, the 7 basics, it's not actually what's going to help you on the job. What's going to help you on the job are the skills of throwing yourself into a project that's got many files, hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and actually figure out how to navigate that effectively. That's going to be a game changer for you when you get on the job, for sure. So what we want to do is we want to really master this fundamental skill of navigating and understanding the code that other people write, right? That's the first step. Because to be honest, research has shown that when we go to fix bugs, 80%, fully 80% of the time and effort is spent understanding the code. 80%. It's the Pareto rule, the 80-20 rule. So if you can master the skill of walking into a random place in a software system, a random piece of code, and actually understand what's going on, okay, now you have a ninja superpower for coding, right? Where you can really become a 6-figure software developer quickly and easily. I love this. Awesome. So I think, so that was number 3. Eric has another comment. Keep the comments coming, Eric. This is awesome. I'm going to just give a quick read through. How do we see on problem solving when it comes to the scenario that you found the solution? Let's test it internally and see what can be improved. Ooh, such a good question, Eric. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Eric is getting at is what happens when you have that success and you do successfully find a bug and you solve it, right? There's now the question is, do we have more work here? Are we done? And that can actually be really hard when you are the solver. And if you have to do more work, if other tests come up negative, right? So imagine you fix a bug and okay, awesome, it works. Pat myself on the back. Yes, we did it. I love it. So good. Okay, but now, well, does it really work fully? We solved the immediate need, but how thoroughly have we tested? So there's this disconnect and this disincentive between the person who's solving the bug and testing it. Because by its very nature, if you test it more thoroughly and you find more bugs, you have more work to do. So most developers, it's not in their interest to test their code fully. Not intentionally, right? But at the end of the day, it's going to lead to more work, right? And so that's why in some companies like Microsoft, they actually dedicate a tester separately to every developer so that every line of code the developer writes is tested by a third party whose responsibility is not to fix the code, right? So they work in tandem. So if this is you, if you're going through situations where you solve a bug, you want to make sure you can be very clear on your perspective and separate yourself so that you can focus like, okay, I'm in development mode now. I'm fixing the bug. And then take that hat off and put on your testing hat. How can I break it? Because in its very nature, inherently, you're giving yourself more work if you test successfully and find bugs, right? So awesome. And so you always, and to be honest, I would always recommend every time you implement a piece of code, part of the process of continuous self-improvement is always looking at the code you wrote. So whether that's testing it, but to be honest, what I usually recommend people do is take a pass over for dryness. Dryness. What does that mean? I have if you've seen me before, you've probably heard this word, but just in case, dry stands for don't repeat yourself. Don't repeat yourself. So this is a super helpful concept that if you always apply it after you've taken the step to write the code. So you've written the code, it works, it's functional. Yes, celebrate that win. And then pause. This is how great developers get better. Look at the code. Could it be done better, drier, in a way that doesn't repeat ourselves? If you consistently apply this idea, don't repeat yourself, eventually you will derive every basic software engineering design principle that's out there, right? Solid and dry are basically the two things you really want to focus on. And so it's just like, I don't know if you guys ever took an English class and you wrote a first draft of an essay and then you turned it in, right? How much better is that second draft of that essay when you turn it in? It's the same idea with code. Don't just get the functionality working. Pause. And don't pause for days here. This is 10 to 20 minutes, right? A fraction of the time it took you to write the original code. Just take a moment and look over it. Could I have done that better? Could I have made that drier? Is there a way I could make that more efficient? Make it more concise, more readable, right? Awesome. Take that moment and do it because you know what'll happen. The next time you encounter a similar challenge, you're not going to need to do it and then think through it and do that again. You're going to do it right away from the start. This is how great developers get more and more efficient. This is why great developers don't just start at 6 figures, but go up to 200K, 300K, all the way up to 900K. Because a developer operating at the 900K level is exponentially more efficient even than a 6-figure developer, even than a 40 to 60K developer, right? We want to be that elite, efficient developer. Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey guys, great to see you in the live. Love it. So good. Great questions, Eric. Keep them coming. So good. So we want to not just write from scratch. That was point number 3 of how not to become a software developer. Only writing code from scratch is not going to set you up for success on the job. Instead, we want to learn how to navigate and understand the code that other people write. Number 4, how to not become a 6-figure software developer. Write a lot, run a little. Write a lot and run a little. What does this mean? So sometimes when we sit down to solve a problem, have you ever encountered this, or maybe you've done it yourself, where we sit down, we write like 10 to 20 lines or even 100 lines, and then we hit run? You know, that's the hard way. That's the hard way to do software development. Ideally, we want an approach, and the way 6-figure software developers approach writing code is that we want to make finding bugs easy, because 6-figure software developers know that bugs are a fact of life. We don't get flustered. We don't get uncertain. We don't get frustrated often. We try not to. At the end of the day, 6-figure software developers know that bugs are a fact of life, right? Every bug is a call for us to learn more, to broaden our horizons, to deepen our understanding. And because coders are lifelong learners, we recognize that bugs are just part of life. So instead of getting frustrated when we get a bug, we change our development process so that bugs are super simple to solve. We have to make a slight upfront change. And that change is not writing hundreds of lines of code before writing it. That change is finding the smallest change that we can type. What is the smallest thing we can do to transform our current program one step closer to where we're trying to go? One step. Might be just one line. Okay, we write it and we run it. Does the output what we expect? And to do that effectively, we have to know in advance before we run what we expect. Because if we just look at it and be like, yeah, that's good, hand wave, no, this is where bugs happen, right? It does you no good to run the code if you haven't taken the time to figure out ahead of time what that code should be, what the output should be. And so this is the process that we want to follow. And it might seem slow in the beginning. It might seem like, oh gosh, really? Like I do this every time? These are the secret tools of the 6-figure software developer so that they're always making progress quickly and easily. Because think about it. When you write 100 lines and you run it and there's a bug, it doesn't work the way you expect. Where's your bug? I don't know. It's in one of 100 places, one of 100 lines. But imagine you wrote one line of code and you ran it and it didn't work. Where's your bug now? In that one line. Not that much to Google from one line of code, right? There's only so many things you can try. When you write out so much code and then run it, it's so easy to get lost and confused and down paths that aren't going to serve you, right? Red herrings, like, oh, maybe the bug is over here, or maybe it's over here, right? First, we have to isolate. Now, if you do, let's say you do make the mistake of, implementing 100 lines and then running it. The way you can backtrack from that, because this happens to everybody, is to isolate it. So you want to just narrow down where is it in the code that the bug actually is. So can you confirm that this half of the code works? Does that half of the code works? And there could be multiple bugs in 100 lines because one bug can mask the presence of another. So just because you found one doesn't mean it's bug-free everywhere. So best practice is write a single line. And really the do here is to master testing and debugging. Sit down and know what your code should output before you write it. Another way of doing this in a more formal way is test-driven development. And then understand how to debug. Walk through, whether it's print statements line by line, whether it's walking it through manually by hand on pencil and paper, know how your code works. Know what's happening at every line so that you can recognize when it's not happening the way you want it. Awesome. And finally, number 5, how not to become a 6-figure software developer. Only follow code along tutorials. And I know this is such a common way of learning to code, and it definitely has value. But if it's the only way you're learning to code, you're not going to be set up for success, right? You're not going to be set up for success because what's happening when we watch a coding tutorial? Let me give you a little bit of an analogy, right? So imagine you're watching a house show and you're watching them transform this old dilapidated home into this beautiful space. Right? It's amazing. And there's so much fun, right? There's so much payoff. I get to see the end result. Yes, win. I love it. It looks so beautiful. But am I actually learning how to renovate a house myself? No, right? There's so many problems that are arising that they have to solve. They have to have these solutions. And we just get to sit back and watch. Oh, that's great. Look at all the things they did. So cool. But does it get me any closer to being able to renovate a house myself? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe how to design a house, but not necessarily how to build it, right? Not how to fix it. And so the same thing is true with coding, right? There's going to be different challenges that arise. And we need to know when we're faced with, okay, what's the next step? What's my next move? We need to have an answer. It doesn't always have to be the right answer, but we need to have one. And if we only ever follow the coding tutorials, we're not going to have that. Now, one thing you can do is if you really want to follow coding tutorials, they can be a super useful tool in your learning toolbox. One way to do it is to pause them, is to get what the person is trying to create. And then if you get stuck, watch the video up to that point and then pause and try to do the rest yourself. If you're always trying to do it before you watch the expert, you will at least be building that problem-solving muscle. But at the end of the day, the absolute best way to learn is by experience. At least this is what I've experienced, and the dozens of students inside the Joy of Coding Academy. We learn by doing. And the best way to learn how to become a six-figure software developer is on a team for a client project or for someone who is working in their professional capacity who has a software need. Because at the end of the day, that's what a six-figure software developer is doing. So if you really want to know what that is like and be set up for success and know all the ins and outs of that experience, work on a team, work for an actual client who has a business need, who is looking for software. And that is going to be the best preparation you'll ever have. And it's not about how many. It's not about doing like 5 gazillion projects. One project done really well and deeply, that'll totally kick things out of the water and get you started on the path to success. Awesome questions. Awesome. All right, I see another comment here. Slade, code along tutorials are my bread and butter. Love it, Slade. Just make sure you're pausing them. Just make sure you're pausing them, because otherwise it's like watching house shows on HGTV. You might not learn what you need to learn to do it yourself, right? So pausing them, trying to do it yourself, and keeping advancing, that's really important. And I think the challenge here, especially with code along videos, is the mental game. If you are looking for code along videos, you want to make sure that the person is not just doing it, but they're explaining their thought process. Why are they doing this now? Why are they doing it this way? If you're watching a code along tutorial and they're not explaining the meta of what their thinking is, they're not externalizing that, it's not going to be a good fit for learning, right? So you want to make sure that they're explaining what they're doing and why, so that when you get stuck, you know, okay, what's their thought process? Because at the end of the day, becoming a six-figure software developer is about honing in on your personal software development process, right? That's what's going to help you be successful. That's what the employer is going to be paying for, your ability to learn and create code that is correct and integrate it with their system and work on a team. All right, awesome. Oh, such good comments, guys. Keep them coming. I love it. So good. And if you'd like more support on your journey to become a six-figure software developer, reach out, let us know. Happy to support you inside the Joy of Coding Academy, where we offer guaranteed internships so that students can get the experience they need and become six-figure software developers and have those skills in 6 months. All right. So again, signing off, I'm Dr. Emily from the Joy of Coding Academy. Have a great day. Happy coding.